Hello, I'm Reverend Rick, and it is my honor to be with you today. We really hope that this video is a blessing to you. And if it is, please consider making a donation. People watch our videos locally when they cannot necessarily come to church throughout the United States and the world. So please join us and click the link below and make a donation. Thank you, and let this be a blessing to you.
All right, we're in for a treat. Not that we already haven't had treat here, but we're in for a really big treat. You know, I've been on this, I started the church 20 years ago, and during that 20 years, I have never ever invited a person from our home office, from our mothership, to come and speak to us, primarily because, although I had a lot of little reasons, but primarily because I don't think people want to hear about bureaucracy when they come to church. You want to hear about principle. Then I ran into this guy who's the spiritual leader of all 400 of our communities throughout the world, and I realized he's the real deal. This is a guy whose primary purpose is to live, to learn, to live, and to teach spiritual principles. Those kinds of spiritual principles that will not only make you and I sit up straighter in our chairs, not only make you and I more successful in our lives, not only allow you and I to have a closer connection with Source, with the divine, but also his leadership has moved us into a direction that I think is beautiful. It's a direction that holds that idea that we can create a world that works for everyone. And not only does he speak it, because you know, for part of my crankiness with home office is they would say the right thing, but there was no action. And he has brought those principles into action. And so I could say a lot of things, but he's going to be featured in Science Mind magazine next month. It's not this month, but you'll see it next month. And here's something that caught my eye that I totally believe in him, and that is this. All limitation is really created by an inability to see beyond what's right in front of you. He not only believes it, but he's leading us to a greater vision for not only this movement, but also for our own lives and the lives of our sisters and brothers who aren't here yet. Will you welcome, please, with me, Reverend Dr. Ken Gordon.
Service, I came up here in an altered state from something that's going on in this church. Now I thought, I'm going to get away with it this time. I don't have to get totally embroiled in it. I'll be ready to do my talk. So sitting down there, and you guys preached to me, I'll tell you. So there it is again. Dr. Georgia says that there's never underestimate the power of the healing effect of this sanctuary. And I've got to tell you, there's something going on here that's big time and good. So congratulations. And congratulations, Dr. Georgia. 20 years, that's spectacular. Look what you've done in 20 years. Can you imagine what you're going to do for the next 100? Yeah, right, with God at your side. That's incredible. You know, again, Dr. Georgia said she doesn't invite people from home office, so I've got an absolute confession. Is I only go there twice a year, so I'm not from home office. I have no administrative duties whatsoever, none. Matter of fact, my favorite line is, I don't know, when somebody's got a complaint about what's going on at the mothership, as they call it. They don't allow me to do the administrative duties for quite obvious reasons, mostly because my track record isn't that good with it. But I will tell you that we're celebrating our 100th anniversary of Centers for Spiritual Living, Science and Mind, Religious Science. And what a difference we've made in the world over the last 100 years. I take full credit for it all, including the Berlin Wall falling down. It's us. It's us. It's us. We are a cutting-edge teaching. And the day that we stop or cease to be a cutting-edge teaching is the day that perhaps we should hang up our shingles. We're not a mainstream teaching. We're a teaching that teaches what the four corners are that Dr. Georgia was talking about. And we're a teaching that teaches the potential and the possibility of evolution in our life if we permit it and we allow it to take place. If we open ourselves up to be able to grow and take on new experiences and not get hindered and stuck by hanging on to the old ones, the old belief systems that we have. Whether that's the micro or the macro, whether it's about creating a world that works for everyone, whether it's about awakening the individuals or awakening the soul of humanity, or whether or not it's about raising yourself up out of dis-ease, discomfort, lack. It's all possible and potential for each and every one of us when we practice the principles that we espouse, when we put them into action in our lives. And so we live in this time now after 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, because this movement that is taking place didn't start with Science of Mind. It's not going to end with Science of Mind. It didn't start anywhere except the soul and the resonance of the individual within each and every one of us. We're not here because there's a message that we want to come and hear. We're here because there is a resonance that takes place that draws and attracts us to something that we're familiar with, that we know, and we've known forever. And humanity in a whole is exactly in that line. Now, the Master Teacher Jesus said, those who are poor in spirit will always be with us, and yes, that probably is true. But the vast majority of humanity want the same thing. They want to wake up, they want to be comfortable, they want to be loved, they want to be fulfilled, they want to be nurtured, they want to be nourished, and they want to nurture and nourish. And the only thing that has prevented or stopped anyone from ever doing that is the old ideas that we hold on to that come from our culture or from our upbringing or even maybe perhaps from our DNA. It doesn't matter. But there is that thing that resides within us that knows that there's a breakthrough, there's a breakout that's available to us, that we can push through these limits if we have the faith to allow it to happen. If we have the faith and the belief to know that it is a potential and a possibility and that it can become the reality for us. And to follow that faith, to have the courage of that faith, is what this teaching is all about. It's what this great spiritual community is all about. This spiritual community is here so that you can come together and rub against each other and build your faith. Build that understanding and that appreciation that says, I know that goodness must be the result of life, and nothing can prevent it from occurring or happening if I'm prepared to let go and surrender and allow that power to pull me to it. We live in a world with less violence. We live in a world with a longer lifespan, not just for North America, but for the entire world. We live in a world where there's greater access to technology and greater access to wealth than we've ever had before. We basically live in a world where disease is being conquered on some scales in some places. We live now today in the best time ever for this world, and there's still a long ways to go. There's still places that we need to break out of. There's no stop to it. Troward says, Thomas Troward, the great metaphysician, said that there's 5 steps to consciousness. He said that you start off with mineral consciousness, then you go to plant consciousness, then you go to animal consciousness, then you go to human consciousness, then you can go to divine consciousness. But I'll share with you, I think there's a long ways between human consciousness that I know today and divine consciousness. So there might be a few more steps in between before we get there. But there is a new humanity that's being birthed, a humanity that's stepping forward and saying, I'm not going to put up with all that old crap anymore. A consciousness that believes that there is enough for everybody. That we don't have to use the old tools and implement the old ways of being anymore. We don't have to withhold or utilize violence. We don't have to punish anymore. What we instead need to do is inspire and awaken to move forward. And you are the ones that do it. You are the ones. You're here because that resonance is within you on this cutting-edge teaching that has brought you to a place, to an understanding and an appreciation that this is divine. There's something that's waking up in each and every one of us that's saying, I have work to do. It's time for me to be able to implement this in the world. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably suffered the same consequences and the same problems that we often do, which is that I know that it is there, and in my moments of my highest power, my highest consciousness, I am absolutely committed and convinced to it. But then I turn on MSNBC or Fox News or read the newspaper or do whatever, and all of a sudden I find myself wavering and falling back. And so spiritual practice for me is demanded from my own self. Otherwise, I would fall back into the old way of being so fast to make your head spin. As a matter of fact, I've even caught myself doing it where in the old days, when I used to stop teaching classes, when I was running the center with my wife, and I would teach 2 or 3 classes a week, and I would teach from September right through till June, and then I'd try to take July and August off. And July and August off meant I no longer needed to teach. I could sit back, relax. I only needed to do Sunday services. Everything was hunky-dory. The issue was, if I stopped doing my spiritual practice, what happened was I found myself back where I came from, back where I began from, back in the consciousness that said, nothing can be changed, nothing can be done about this. I heard it said today, I go back to victim and move out of victory. And that's precisely the circumstance and the situation that a spiritual community like this puts into action for each and every one of us, is a place to come to be connected where you can be assured that your faith is going to be bolstered and nobody's going to turn around and tell you that it's no good, that it doesn't work, that that can't happen for you, that you're not good enough. I've always wanted to preach to the choir. So I'll tell you why I do what I do. And I travel a couple hundred days a year. I've been doing, I worked it out, I think I'm 19 years or something in upper leadership with the mothership. And I don't do it just because I think I'm a religious scientist. That's such a limited idea. I don't do it because I think science of mind is the only teaching. Because there's lots of great teachings that are out there that are waiting. We are not alone in our belief in truth. We probably have our own tools to be able to raise ourselves up, and it's the best I've ever found. Don't get me wrong, I've looked. And if I found something better, I would probably be doing that, but I haven't. So this is the best chalice that I can find. It's the best pot that I can find that allows us to be able to achieve what we need to achieve, and that is to create a collective consciousness to transform the world. And that collective consciousness needs to be a larger collective consciousness than the one that came from the past. And the one that came from the past that believed in withholding, that believed in colonization, that believed in racism, that believed in all of the various gifts that we've been given as we have evolved out from that human consciousness closer to the divine consciousness. And the awakening of it is to realize and recognize that it is not run by the masses on this side. There is a limited amount of people that are moving it forward, that are holding on to it, that are empowering that. And we have the responsibility to stand up for what we hold to be true and to be able to live from it. And not be put down by people who say, oh, that's too political. Not be put down by people who say, oh, you can't talk about that, that's not spiritual. It is spiritual. Our lives, the society we live in, is spiritual. You don't need to be pious to be spiritual. So you get to step forward and you get to say, you know what, that's wrong. Stop doing that. And the evolution that we're in as a teaching, the evolution that science of mind finds itself in, the evolution that unity finds itself in, The evolution that clear-thinking, spiritual people, which are all of us, is beginning to discover is there's got to be a new way to do it. The old way of doing it was if something offended you, if there was somebody in power in your country that was doing stupid things, I'm a Canadian, we have Justin Trudeau, so I'll just... When Justin Trudeau... TJT. Okay, when Justin Trudeau does something that is absurd, okay, I have a right and I have a responsibility to say, stop it. Don't do that. Don't do that in my name. Don't do that in the name of Canadians. Don't do that. Stop doing that. But I can't. In the old days, what I would do, or the society and the culture we came from, is what you would do is you would hate the person. You'd say, oh my God, that's terrible. We need to revolt. We might withhold our taxes. We might do things that are the old school of the way things were trained to do in the first place that got us in the mess that we're in, right? Right. Instead, what you have to do, and this is the evolution of the consciousness of this movement. And this is a grassroots movement. I never said his name. And this is a grassroots movement. And so it's all of us, okay? What we need to learn to do is we need to learn to respond to what is happening, not from the same energy that it's happening from. Because if we've got someone preaching hate, we can't hate back in return and expect it to be different. What we have to learn to do, everybody in this room, it's your responsibility because you're here. What we need to learn to do is we need to learn to respond to the issue from love. We need to learn to respond from the issue with understanding and compassion, and we need to learn to respond to the issue. And not be quiet and say, oh, well, that's political, I don't want to do that. That's not the answer to the evolution of where this teaching is going, and where truth is moving, and how it's happening. The answer is to actually stand for what we believe, stand for our values, stand for our principles, and be able to say, no, I believe this to be true, not that. I give the analogy of this by recognizing my 5-year-old grandson. When I see my 5-year-old grandson running with scissors, right, I go and I take them away from him. And he jumps and spits and throws a fit because he wants the scissors, but I take them away from him. But I don't take them away saying, I hate you, you little monster. I take them away with love, with appreciation, with respect, with honor, but I take them away. I remove it. I don't sit in a corner and say, oh, it's not my job. I'll just upset him if I do that. I take them away. And that's exactly the consciousness that we are learning right now, that is the next step. And some people have learned it. I'm more than aware that there are avatars in our midst who are way ahead of this than I am. And in turn, I know that there are people who don't have a clue what I'm talking about. But understand that that is where we are growing and expanding to. It's no different than mineral to plant to animal to human to the divine. We're still on that same pathway, being pulled and drawn to it, each and every one of us, to an awakening of something that always has been, that resonates with us in our very, very souls. And so we build chalices or pots or containers such as CSA, and we put it together, and the reason we do it is so that what we can do is we can educate people and move it forward so that they can transform their lives as individuals and transform the world as a society. And if you believe in it, then it's your responsibility to support it, to work from it. You know, the plot isn't what's important. The contents are important. But the plot is all important. And the reason it's so important is because there has to be something that we can put the contents into, so that what we can do is we can create the recipe and the menu to make the stew work. Try going at home and not making soup without a pot. You throw water and carrots and onions onto the stove and turn it on and see what happens. It's the same in our society. It's the same thing. And this is a container that contains the wishes, the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, and the potential of the world, as long as we're aware that that's what we're here for and that's what we're part of. To step forward proudly and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe. You can find our principles and you can find our values. Dr. Georgia will give them to you if you want, but all you have to do is go online and look at our organization design model, and it's all written in there. It's there. It tells you exactly what it is. I write these white papers on regular events that go on. And when I do, it's not my opinion I'm writing. I actually go to see what the values are and see how it's against the value, or how it's opposed to it, or how it supports the value. Because the truth of the matter is, it's not political. It's spiritual.
That's right.
Humanity should have, every single individual, every living entity on this planet has the right to life. Every single entity on this planet has the right to be able to be nurtured and nourished and take advantage of the abundance that is all around us everywhere we look. And to withhold that because we think there isn't enough, to withhold that because we want to punish someone, to withhold that just creates more and more of the same problem all over the place. That we can transform the world if we transform the way that we think about it. And to do that, what we have to do is we have to surrender things. We have to let go of things on a societal level and on an individual level. For me, if I want to go someplace and I'm hanging on to here and I want to go to the piano, what do I have to do to get to the piano? I have to let go of the podium to be able to move to it. Whatever it is that we want in our lives, whether it be health, wealth, creative expression, loving relationships, spiritual contentment, depth, whatever it is, the only thing that prevents us from it is what we're holding on to. One of your four corners is your perfect, whole, and complete. I'll tell you something. Is that if you closed your eyes right now and you surrendered your past, everything that you had in your past that brought you to this point, and you surrendered your anxiety and your anticipation for the future, everything that you're frightened of moving forward, and just sat in the present moment in its completeness, there would be no hunger, there would be no disease, there would be no hate, there would be no anger. There would only be the divine consciousness itself, perfect, whole, and complete. That's the meaning of that teaching. That's where it comes from. It comes from, that's our core belief. What we do is we structure things around us, walls, that allow or make us so that what we can do is we hold them to be true, and then we're surprised and shocked when they show up in our life as the experience of what we've got. And oftentimes when we want to manifest something in our life or bring something in as a demonstration, what we do is we take our consciousness, and if you visualize consciousness as, let's say, a large rubber ball, okay? And you visualize that that's the totality of the small c consciousness of who we are. It is the totality of our beliefs, both known and unknown, conscious and unconscious. And that's what creates the form of it. And so picture a big circle here and say that's your consciousness. And then what we want something out over here that isn't in our consciousness. If we're not experiencing it, it doesn't exist within our consciousness. So it demands that what we do is that we find a way to bring it in. And most of us in humanity, what we try to do, not you, I'm talking about other people, what we try to do is we try to stick our arm out and hang on to it and pull it in to what we want. And you can't get it that way. So you've got this big circle, which is your consciousness, and then you have this line that comes out here. It doesn't work that way. What we need to do as a race of people is we need to realize that to get to here, and we're here, what we need to do is grow. We need to keep growing until we envelop what it is that we want and it becomes part of who we are. And that's when it becomes the form of our experience, whether it be health, wealth, creative expression, loving relationships, or a world that works for everyone. And the hesitancy that some of us have is a fear that it's not true, that we can't have it, which is part of our belief system that we've been raised with. That we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not intelligent enough, there isn't enough to go around, etc., etc. Name your poison. And the thing is that that's what prevents us from having it. And so what it demands we do in this teaching, in this cutting edge teaching, because we lead the world. Believe it. Have you noticed, when I was first starting out in ministry, my wife and I moved from California back to our hometown of Kelowna, British Columbia. And I rented a grade 3 schoolroom to do my first ever class. So I had this class that was taking place, and I had 8 students, and they all showed up and sat in little grade 3 desks. At the end of the class, I had 4. Okay, so, but I remember coming in, and oh my God, was I arrogant. It was like, I know it all. I come out of California. Oh, everybody's taught me everything I need to know. I'm so spiritual, you just can't believe it. And these people are so fortunate to have me transition into their lives. And so I get there, and I walk into the classroom, and I'm thinking, I'm going to teach them all this stuff. I know it all. And I walk in, and I stand in front, and I look up, and around the balance of the classroom in this grade 3 classroom, is everything I learned when I was in California for 8 years. All done in affirmations for the children in grade 3. And so I realized and understood that I got to run really fast to stay ahead of these guys. So I better get studying some more. But there it was. And so, you know, where was I going with this? We need to continue to grow and to expand. We don't stop where we're at. It's a demand that we continue to do that, and that's what our responsibility is. And to support like-minded things that do the same thing, that help us do it. But appreciate it's not just all about us, it's about the world itself. We lay and cast before us a vision no matter what it is, and as long as we don't let the triviality of life prevent us from going there, and we put our energy and our intention on it and solely on it, then it must become a reality because we have the faith and the trust to know that it's there. So what we need to do is we need to provide ourselves with the opportunity to let go of these ideas that are holding on and fall into the faith of our own teaching. To know that all things are possible when I place it in front of me and provide it with the energy to manifest and bring it into being. And to be able to trust the higher power, the infinite intelligence, the divine goddess, the divine God, whatever you choose. The Muslims say there's 99 names for God, and one of them is Georgia. You know, put your name in there. And so, you let go of what that old belief was. You let go of that idea. I know when I talk about a world that works for everyone that there are people in the audience that are saying, and how do you do that? Or that's impossible. It's not impossible. Because I don't do it, you don't do it, we don't do it, Spirit does it. When we surrender and let ourselves go, everything happens to be able to draw and attract us to what it is that we seek. To be able to put before us everything that needs to be done. Now, William Meader, the head of the Theosophical Society, in 2014, he said this. He said, there is a bright light that is shining now, brighter than we've ever had the experience of before, that is taking place in our society. Hallelujah. Here's the problem. The larger and the brighter the light, the bigger the shadow. And the shadow is expanding equivalently to the light. But the shadow is nothing but the absence of light. That's all it is. And so what we have to realize and recognize is that as it comes and spreads, everything that is unlike the light itself is going to cast that shadow. And that shadow, as it gets cast, We have to appreciate the fact that that is our learning edge. That is where we need to go to be able to transform. You mentioned going and talking to somebody who it was too painful to do the work, and yet they're living in pain. That's exactly what's happening to the world right now. And we have to push our way through the pain into the shadow so that we can shine our light into the shadow and make it dissipate and dissolve and disappear. And that's the only way that we can do that. William Meeder also said that there are 3 types of people that are working in the world today. The first group of people are people who want it to be the way it always was before. And they're willing to fight and to die to make that happen. They do not want any change in their life in any way, shape, or form. They want it to be the way it always was before. That's what they're willing to hang on to. I was listening to a sociologist on CBC about 10 years ago, and the sociologist was talking about absolutism and fanatical behavior, whether it be the Christian right in certain areas or whether it be the jihadists in others. And he was talking about how it's come to be and come there, and he said that because in the last 60 years or 100 years, everything in our society has transformed. You know, it used to be you got a job, you worked a job, you retired, that's what you did. Now, it's not uncommon to have people have 15, 20 different careers throughout their life. It used to be you got married and you died and you were still married. That's not the truth. But you know, once again, name and put your own thing in there. But everything has transformed in our circumstances. And he said that what's happening with religious fanaticism is that they refuse, that there is a segment of society that says, you changed my job, you changed my marital status, you changed, all victim stuff. And then it comes to the end when it said, and I will kill you before I will allow you to be able to change my religion. It's the last stanchion and hold on of an old way of being, an old way of thinking. And if it doesn't change, what will happen is we will retrograde back again. And so it requires that we actually be willing and open to have a new idea and a new thought. What a novel idea. And to be able to let go of those old concepts and those old ideas and not to be one of those people who say, oh, no. That's the way we've always done it. That's the way we're going to do it in the future. Second group of people he talks about are the group of people who feel they have no empowerment. They have no power whatsoever in their life. They think it's useless for them to bother to do anything. They don't even vote. They just withdraw and withhold. They have a level of pissed-offtivity, and they allow that to control what their environment looks like. They embrace and hug their upsetness so that they don't have to do anything to make the transformation. It seems to me the election here that 49% of the people didn't vote. You wonder who elects who. 49% of people. In Canada, it's probably the same thing. But that's that group of people. Then he said there's a third group of people. There is a group of people who have faith, who have an appreciation and an understanding of their responsibility in the world. And they are willing to walk through the pain and through the anger to arrive at their destination. Because they know that they have power in their energy and in who they are. Not the power that necessarily stands out with a placard, although that's good too, but the power of your own persistence and your own energy. The power that puts me into an altered state when I sit here during the service. The power that you guys bring here and fill into these chairs. The healing, loving power that's there that dominates and creates a vortex in this room that is palpable. And so don't tell me you don't have power, because you do. And you're this group that sits in the middle. And Meeder said this group is the savior group. This is the one that's going to transform the world. They're the ones that are going to draw and attract here, and they're the ones that are going to draw and attract here to continue to grow and expand and create that collective consciousness that we're talking about. And it's happening right here and right now, even as I speak. We will not run away from the shadow. We will not back down from the shadow. We will not hide from the shadow, and we will not allow the shadow to exist as long as it's our watch. We will step forward and say, don't do that. Running with scissors is going to hurt you or somebody else. Stop it and take the scissors away. Your responsibility, if you're with me and if you agree with it, your responsibility is to open yourself to an elevated consciousness that says, I will no longer put up with the lies and what I see on the outside as the shadows. I will shine my light on them with love and understanding and compassion. That is the future of our teaching. It's the future of our world. It's the future of this church. And it's the future of God itself. God bless you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Him to come here. We listen to him all day. Wednesday night, Christ Unity, will be there. I want to just take another minute. I know we're running a little over, but I just want to take another minute because, you know, we're entering into our pledge season, a time in which we ask you to make an intention of your gift for the year on a pledge card. That'll happen in October. But before that, the last couple of weeks, we've been introducing the soup that goes into the pot called CSA. Because, you know, we are not, our founder said we are not a church and its people, but we are a church as its people. And the people in this church are making a difference in their own lives and in the lives of others. So I want to just talk about a couple of people today. I want to start out, you know, we're a family church. Sometimes people say, oh, that's that gay church over in West Sacramento. No, I'm gay. The church is not gay. Not all of you are gay. We have families here, and we're proud of that. We look for families here. We have the Espinosa Ludwig family, and this is what they say. At CSA, they found a family home, that the 4 principles have become the cornerstone of their family values. So whenever they get in a fuss with each other, or they bring a fuss from school or work, they look at it at the dinner table through those 4 values. And so Maya, the 13-year-old, many of you know, she spoke here before about loving animals. She said that when she heard the principle, God is all there is, she began to understand that that's true of animals too. She became a vegetarian. She became an animal rights activist. And that's a powerful thing. The dad, Renato, heard a message that I talked about being not in your zone of excellence, but moving into your zone of genius. His zone of excellence is being a civil engineer, very successful civil engineer. He's moving into his zone of genius by creating a niche movie history museum. Totally different, but that's what his zone of genius is. And his wife, Libby, she said that she grew up like many of us in families that weren't nurturing and began to realize that something was wrong with her. She had the not enough isms that so many of us face, the not enough isms. And what she realized is she is whole, perfect, and complete, just as she is right now. Maybe some behaviors to change, but at her essence, she is whole, perfect, and complete. I never do this very well. Okay, let's see what's happening. There we go. That's the Renato family. Renato, please stand up. Let us love you. The next person is, many of you know that it's not easy to be a black transgender woman on the planet, anywhere on the planet. and that is true of one of our members. She said it wasn't easy, but that she was committed to showing up in the world as the universe intended her to be. The universe intended her to be. After a spring of bad circumstances and bad decisions, by her own admission, she wound up in sleeping on the floor of a friend's micro apartment. You know those micro apartments that are really tiny? The only place that she could be was on the floor of this micro apartment. And she realized while she was on that floor, she realized she had a choice to make. And her choice was to go from victim to victory. And she remembered this funny little church in West Sacramento that a couple of years prior a friend had taken her to, and that she felt welcome there. And she felt peace there. That's what you did. You welcomed her. You put your arms around her. You made her want to come back at a time in which she was looking for victory in her life. But here's what kills me. Those of us who are complaining, oh, the traffic is so bad, I can't get to church in traffic. Here's what she did to get to church. She had to take 2 buses, a train, and walk 2 miles to get here. But she was making her journey into freedom. She came every Sunday. Everyone stand up. Put Ebony's picture up there, thank you. I'm kind of like Dr. Ken with the administrator. They shouldn't let me have the PowerPoint. The last person I want to, and I want to just say, as many of you know, Ebony has not only found victory for herself, but she is a principal leader in the LGBT community in the state. That's what happens when you take these principles, and that's what happens when you contribute to this church, because you create the pot. You create the place for people like Ebony and others to come to. And this third woman I want to just briefly mention, this is a woman who found out about us through YouTube. She was living in Indiana, and she said that she was brought up by a very abusive set of parents. And her father continually told her over and over and over again, she'll never amount to anything, she was a mistake, she was a problem, she didn't have any skills, until she started to believe it. And she said when she was in her 20s, she was just in one of those dark nights of the soul, and a friend of hers came by and said, you know, I've told you everything I know to tell you, and I think what you need to do is to listen to Reverend Georgia in a sermon. She's out in Sacramento, but she's on YouTube. Start listening to her sermons. And she did. She started listening to those sermons because she didn't know what else to do. She knew she had to pick herself up, but she didn't know what else to do. Because of you, because you've created this container, there was a place for her to go. And she said she heard the sermon, Divine Do-Overs. And in that sermon, Divine Do-Overs, I said this, and I didn't remember I said it, but she wrote it because she's got it in her head. She's got it affixed to memory. She said, I can tell you the exact place I was standing in my house when I heard these words over the video. And it's no matter how many screw-ups you've had, no matter what your history is, no matter how many bad decisions you've made, it has no bearing on your present or future success, unless, of course, you wanted to. She said she took that message to heart and she kept repeating it. She listened to that video over and over and over again until she heard herself say, maybe I'm not as bad. Maybe I'm not as big a screw up as I thought I was. Maybe I can live a life of success. Well, in 1916, a couple of years later, she kept going on her sermons. A couple of years later, she came through those doors. And through tears in her eyes, she said to me, among other things, Reverend Georgia, never give up on streaming your videos because you don't know who they're making an impact on. You, because of your contributions, allow us to videotape this, allow us to get the word out, create Super Bowl for all of us to be in together to learn about these powerful spiritual principles. Stevie, will you stand up? Stevie Shore.